And yet, in his treatment of nature, his analysis is focused on nature as a source of death anxiety. He often turns to psychoanalytic theory to explain how nature is a threatening reminder to all of us of what limits us and deprives us of power. It confronts us with our impotence and our inevitable deaths. He speaks of the mother's body, drawing on Freud. He speaks of the mother's body, for example, as symbolizing natural determinism and loss of autonomy, stating that even as children, we wish to escape our mothers so that we might be free, powerful, and transcendent. Even when Becker speaks of the grandeur of nature, it is to explain how awesome nature overwhelms us unbearably, and we must cope by repressing it or fragmenting it, cutting it down to manageable size, to control, to use it, to build a world from its materials of our own culture. Nature, he argues, evokes our fear of death and of life, and both arouse our death anxiety. We need to recover the lost meanings of nature if nature is to be a useful symbol, a basis for a new heroism, a vision of our family, our home. We need to look again. All truly powerful symbols have complex meanings. Yes, nature reminds us of the limits of all that lives and our shared fate, which is death. But also, it is nature from which life arises, and in nature we see not only birth followed by death, but also by rebirth, all of which, taken together, give us the pattern, the cycle of all creation. And this cycle is itself a comfort, a way of seeing death as part of ongoing life. This was the understanding of nature throughout human history until the Renaissance and Enlightenment, the machine age, the scientific method reframed our perspective. To see only death in nature is false and self-defeating. To see only life in nature is sentimental and naive. Nature is creativity and tragedy. But nature tells the truth about empirical reality, of human life and all that lives. Nature reminds us of our interdependence, our immersion, which is a fact we suppress, but which can rescue us from alienation and rootlessness. Heroic strategies linked to the well-being of nature call us to be accountable for our actions and their impact. They call for bold visions of expanded responsibility and creative challenge in caretaking to make the future possible. This is closer to Becker's ideal of cosmic heroism than any new car or celebrity obsession could ever bring us. My final point is asking about some stealth strategies for disseminating new ideas about nature as a new form of heroism. This more complex view of nature is more truthful and realistic, and that means that it offers us opportunities for heroism that are actually achievable. We can know that our heroic strategies have effects in reality, not in our inflated illusions. We can measure their effects and critique and refine or redesign our strategies if necessary. And yet, any new mode of heroism is threatening. It's probably especially threatening in this case because we're being asked to take on something that's more intellectually and probably psychically challenging. We're being asked to accept our fear of the destructive power of nature. At the same time, we're being urged to recover our sense of trust in the creative power of nature. Scientific efforts to cultivate respect for nature and responsibility for the human impact on nature by informing us of environmental degradation might be persuasive to some, but not for all. Many of us are tied to a sense of heroism by our superior place in the chain of life, and to a view of nature as a resource to draw on in the making of the stuff we display to demonstrate our success. It would be easy to resist such scientific warnings and urgings and defend our own heroic illusions. We do need science, but maybe we need something more, something different. Our defenses may come to the alert when Al Gore warns us about an inconvenient truth, but you know, Avatar might just slip right below the radar. We need the artists, poets, musicians, and filmmakers to remind us of the visions of nature before Kim Lawn became our idea of what grass should look like, before plastics defined the future, before the space program single-handedly created our appetite for reconstituted food in tubes. It may be the artists who will give us the vision of the human family embedded within the family of nature, rather than riding atop of nature. Give us ideas for how we might define heroism in support of nature, rather than control of nature, and remind us that there is comfort for death in the new life that arises from the old. I'd like to close with a story I heard on public radio. I am addicted to public radio. On public radio just a couple of weeks ago, and it's a mother trying to explain to her daughter about the death of a cat. And it is a story told to a child, and yet it's a nice ending because it is the kind of story making that I think we need to be doing. And for both the mother and the child, it was enough.
I believe Constance Kellogg, who believes the role of tax-free cornflakes, schools, and quality programs like this, I believe.
It is time to be donating to NPR.
We are part of something.
So stay tuned. Thank you. We're set. Okay, I'll take some questions.
Declarative question?
That's the goal.
Well, this is not going to be that. It's just something that I think we need to maybe talk about more this weekend if we can, or this may be something we're much longer term. But you mentioned that TMT would suggest that we would do much better working within existing worldviews and existing hero structures and try to change from within than to confront, than to confront head on. And yet, I just don't think we can pretend that what we're talking about, if we're going to save our planet, is easily compatible with this kind of hyper-capitalism that we have developed in this country, where everything is based on everything is reduced to market values and money and so forth. I think we need to be realistic about how much of a radical change we're actually talking about.
I agree with you, but I also, that's one of the reasons why I'm interested in trying to turn to the arts. I think it's quite possible to look at the powerful ways. If you look at the power of literature, I'm always explaining to my students that the power of literature has everything to do with identification. Once you've identified with a character that's been well constructed, you enter the story from their point of view and how expanding that is. I think we are very well defended against any kind of threat to our well-being. John Kenneth Galbraith's opening sentence in, I think the title was Uncertain Age or something like that, Age of Uncertainty. The opening sentence was, the rich would rather die than give up their special privileges. And Cheney, as soon as he came into office, said Kyoto is out. Americans don't want to give up the way they live, and there's no reason they should. And I think when that's the kind of dialogue, as aggressive and confident as it is, and the feeling of entitlement that if we're entitled to anything that we can purchase, taking that head on, I just don't think is going to be very effective. But I think we aren't giving credit where credit is due, and the arts have a great deal of power in shaping symbols and the way we use symbols, the way we apply symbols. And I think the idea of new old meanings of nature, I can already see many kinds of ways that those symbols are out there in the culture, and we need to reach critical mass with it.
So we have one other last comment, question.
Thanks. In reaching out to the longer term of how do we influence change, I'm having a blast influencing my students, and I'm wondering how you're influencing yours, how you're giving them the skill set so that they can apply this to the decisions they're making in their lives.
Do you mean in terms, are you asking in terms of a specific topic?
When you're talking about addressing this and the call to action for artists describing visions of nature and the heroism and getting people to design their lives around healthier behaviors. Mm-hmm. Well, how do you take it to the undergrads?
I try to use as much of that kind of creativity as I can. I usually include fiction, drama. I've taken students to plays before. I've had students write write fictional pieces of their own or respond to fiction. I have students doing writing in most of my courses. The really big ones I can't do papers, but in the smaller ones I do, and I always encourage them to include fiction. And so we've always got a conversation going on about the power of symbols and the creative use of symbols. So whatever the topic of the class might be, and I teach a bunch of different topics, I do try to include that. In asking how effective I am, I think we're still out on that one, but the effort is there.